economics correspondent Andy Verity is with me to look at the figures. What do they suggest to you?
Well, I mean, the first thing we have to say is these aren't independent. These are put out by the government, and it has a political agenda. Obviously, it wants to get the deal through. But what's interesting is the comparison that they're making. They're basically doing analysis, not forecasts, not saying this is what we think will happen, but this is what we reckon the hit to the economy will be under certain scenarios. So as you mentioned in your intro, just looking at the numbers, and by the way, these both assume no immigration from the EU. That's a hit to the economy. It will be 2.5 to 3.9% smaller than it otherwise would have been 15 years from now, assuming that we get something like the government's white paper deal, which was what came out in July. Now, we're not going to get quite that, but the hope is that we get something like that in terms of its effect on economic growth. That works out at about £100 billion, roughly, of what the economy is worth now. Now, have a look at what they're saying we will get if there's no deal. As you mentioned, 9.3%. Now, that would be a massive hit to GDP, something north of £200 billion. It's like removing the output of the whole of Scotland from the UK economy. But while that does sound frightening, you have to bear in mind the broader numbers here. So that would be about 200 billion, but by that time, the economy would be worth about 2.5 trillion. So it's a 9.3% of that. And we have to bear in mind the big assumptions here. No inflow of migrants at all under these assumptions from the EU. And it's all other things being equal. And we have to remember that what really affects the economy isn't just Brexit, it's everything else. So, it's how our industry is doing, it's how productivity is doing, and it's how the rest of the world's economy is doing.
Sure. Okay. Andy, many thanks. Andy Verity there.